Hey kids, have you ever wondered about fairies? Today we're going to read a story from this book called A Treasury for 5-Year-Olds. It has a collection of stories, fairy tales and nursery rhymes. But we will be reading only the stories in this book. And today's pick was by my little niece. And the story is Frieda Gets Her Wings by Ron Randall. Frieda Gets Her Wings. Frieda was the tiniest fairy in the glade, smaller than all her friends. She was more shy and timid too. In fact, everything seemed to frighten Frieda. When Frieda heard something go flap, flutter, flap, flap, flutter, flap, she ran to hide among the daffodils. "Come out, silly," laughed her friend Felicity. "It's only a butterfly." Frieda's cheeks turned bright pink with embarrassment. Splish, splosh, splish, splosh, Frieda heard as she felt something wet on her head. "Oh no," she quavered, ducking under a toadstool. "It's just a little rain," laughed Wendy and Melissa. "How can you be frightened of that?" Frieda turned away, ashamed. Whoosh, whoosh, Frieda heard, and she rushed to shelter inside a hollow log. "Frieda's even afraid of the wind," said Wendy. "She'll never get her fairy wings." A tiny tear slipped out of Frieda's eye. More frightening than the wind or the rain or the butterfly's flapping wings was the thought that Wendy might be right. Frieda longed to get her fairy wings. She dreamt of the day when she would be able to flitter and fly in the moonlight like the grown-up fairies. But she knew that she would have to earn those wings. Every year on the first day of spring, the fairy queen gave lacy, delicate wings to all the young fairies who had proved their bravery. Any fairy who wasn't truly brave would have to wait for another whole year. Frieda was hoping that it would be her turn this year. But how could a frightened fairy ever be brave? As the first day of spring drew near, all the young fairies tried to outdo one another with daring deeds. From her golden throne beside the glade, the fairy queen watched them all. Frieda watched too. "I can reach the top of the rose bush," Melissa called, climbing up the thorny stem. Waving proudly from the top, she plucked a perfect blossom. Then she leapt down with it and raced to the fairy queen's throne. "A present for you, your majesty," said Melissa, curtsying before the queen. "I didn't mind the thorns, and I wasn't even frightened when I jumped from the top. I hope you will think I'm truly brave." "Thank you, Melissa," said the fairy queen. "I'm certainly impressed." Frieda watched and sighed. She would never be able to climb a rose bush. How was she going to impress the fairy queen? That afternoon, Wendy decided that she would bring the fairy queen a special present too. "And I'm going to be even braver than you, Melissa," she said. Wendy began climbing a tall tree. Up Wendy went, higher and higher, until she reached the beehive near the top. "Be careful, Wendy, or the bees will sting you," called Melissa. "I'm not frightened of bees," she shouted. "I'm too brave for that." Reaching into the hive, Wendy pulled out a chunk of sweet, waxy honeycomb. Then, before the bees could catch her, she scrambled down and rushed off to give her present to the fairy queen. "Thank you, Wendy," said the queen, smiling at her. "You are certainly fearless. I bet I'll be the very first fairy to get my wings," Wendy boasted to her friends. The next day, as Frieda and her friends played in the wood, a dragonfly zoomed past. Frieda ran to hide, but Melissa chased after it. "See how brave I am!" she shouted, leaping onto the dragonfly's back. "I'm not afraid of anything." Zoom, vroom, went the dragonfly, swooping and looping and soaring through the air. "Yippee!" cried Melissa. "Being brave is fun!" The fairy queen watched closely and smiled, but Frieda, standing by herself, was miserable. "I can't climb high, and I'm scared of dragonflies," she thought. "How will I ever earn my wings?" Suddenly, Frieda's thoughts were interrupted by a noise coming from a puddle behind her. Frieda turned to listen. It was someone crying for help. Frieda ran over and saw a ladybird struggling in the water. "Help me, please!" she called. "I can't swim!" The ladybird would drown unless someone dived in to save her. But Frieda's friends were all watching Melissa and the dragonfly. Frieda was the only one who could help. "Don't be scared," said Frieda, trying to stop her voice from trembling. "I'm coming to get you." Quaking with fear, Frieda jumped into the puddle and swam out to the ladybird. "Climb on my back," she said to the grateful little bug. All at once, Melissa saw what was happening. "Look," she told the others, "Frieda's rescuing a ladybird." They all ran over to watch, and they cheered as Frieda brought the ladybird to safety. Fluttering above them all, the fairy queen looked down and smiled. The next day was the first day of spring, and all the fairies, young and old, gathered before the fairy queen's throne to see who would get their wings today. The young fairies were chattering with excitement. "Shh!" said one of the older fairies. "The queen is ready to make her announcement." "All the young fairies have been bold and daring," said the fairy queen, "and they should all feel proud. But only one fairy has shown true bravery. So I will give only one pair of wings today, and that fairy is Frieda." It was easy for the others to be brave because they aren't afraid of anything. But Frieda did something very brave, although she was afraid. "Frieda, come forward." To the sound of cheers and applause, Frieda made her way through the crowd. As she knelt down, the fairy queen waved her wand, sending out a shower of glittering fairy dust. There were gasps of delight as a pair of shimmering, lacy, silvery wings appeared on Frieda's shoulders. Frieda's friends rushed over to look at her new wings. "I'm sorry we laughed at you," said Melissa quietly. "Me too," said Wendy. "Now I can see that you're the bravest of us all." "Thank you," said Frieda, smiling. Then very gently she fluttered her brand new wings and rose into the air above the admiring crowd. Frieda's dream had come true at last. So it's okay to be scared as far as you take the right decisions at the right time, like Frieda did here. If you like this video, do hit the like and subscribe button. Bye.